Awesome. Okay.
I'm not hearing you. I'm just seeing myself.
Can you hear me now? You still can't hear me. Boyne, can you hear me? Boyne? Use the chat if you can hear me, Boyne.
Now I can hear you, Gary.
Okay. All right. I'll do my best to work around that. You sound great. You're looking good. I'll share questions in the chat from people, and if need
Okay,
be,
I've got the chat open.
yeah, if need be, then I'll also use the chat to post questions from myself. But okay, let me double check real quick over on LinkedIn. Make sure we're live. All right, cool.
So if anybody's out there wants to start off with a question while Gary's working on technical problems, either put it in the chat or I don't know how else you appear on this show. So I'm here for you. I'm Jay.
I love it. Jay, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, Jay, I would love for you to introduce yourself while people are finding their way in here.
God, I hate doing that. I'm just like you, except an older version of everybody. I started off my first startup when I didn't know anything and made tons of mistakes. And when you fail, what happens is, or actually, anytime you try something, you have one of two outcomes. You either earn or you learn. And either way, it propels you forward. So I've been a serial entrepreneur. I helped launch things like the first auction that you know is eBay, LinkedIn with Reid Hoffman, brought the first advertisers onto. And I've also run major corporations because as you age, they steal you from the startup world. So I've been at the top of Sony and Universal and EMI and vice chairman of Deloitte Digital, 250,000 employees. Worked all over the globe, raised hundreds of millions of dollars for startups, and have spent the past 10 years teaching people how to be successful. I used to teach it at the largest engineering university in the US. Best semester, I had students make 100 million. I don't monetize any of this. I've written a series of books as a way to scale my reach, but I'm trying to pay it forward. I believe in my heart of hearts, entrepreneurs don't sell things, they solve things. So the more people we have solving problems, the better our world is. So that's me. You can look up Wikipedia. Enough about talking about me.
I love it. Well, I'm going to get you to talk a little bit more about you. And yeah, again, Jay, you already said it, but for those that are tuning in on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, Facebook, use the text chat to post questions for Jay to answer or show what you're working on. And we can see how Jay can help you by just sharing insights, pushing, questions your way so you can challenge yourself in your ideas of what you're doing. And we'll go from there. But while we're waiting for some questions to roll in, Jay, you started off talking about how you learn. Well, ideally you're learning as you go from different trials and errors and mistakes and whatever else is going on in your life. I'm curious, being a little bit older and wiser than me and some other people tuning in, what methodology would you suggest or approach that would be that you find most helpful in evaluating what you're doing as you're doing it and looking back and taking the most from those experiences, whether those went well or went terribly wrong?
Got it. So in my book Disrupt You, I talk about an approach that I call the zombie idea. So you're going to come up with an idea, most like your idea is fairly obvious and you don't know enough about the subject matter to know where the pitfalls are. Don't ask grandma, your best friend, your mother, is this a great idea? Because more entrepreneurs are ruined by praise. What you want to find is people in that audience, the people that you expect to buy your stuff, and ask them to rip it apart. Because here's the thing. You're going to find out all the flaws sooner or later. If you find out all the mistakes before you start burning capital, you have more cash to pivot, to weave, to move your sales and get successful. So you want to have everybody, and this should take away your fear in asking questions today, to shoot down your idea and tell you what's wrong. And when you can't find any more people to criticize it, that is what I call a zombie idea. It's the Walking Dead. It can't be killed. That's when you can go up to Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, and you have already done everything that the VCs were going to ask, and you've answered all the questions. You're more prepared to go in, and now when you launch, you have a greater chance of success. There's other places where you'll hit challenges, blitz scaling, something that Reid Hoffman talks a lot about. The skill set to launch a successful business and the skill set to manage and grow a giant company. In my 40 years of doing this, I've probably seen 3 people that can do both. So, and I'm not in that latter thing. I couldn't run General Motors and somebody go, "Can you make it 2% better this year?" I'm like, "Shoot me." So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely touches on it, and you bring up an incredible bit of advice that a lot of people overlook or disregard, especially earlier stage founders, or it doesn't matter what age they are, but they're kind of going out to be a founder for the first time, and they're overeager, or in some cases they're desperate to achieve that success as quickly as possible, and they end up rushing and skipping a lot of steps. And what you just laid out was an incredible first step that many overlook or skip on purpose, and that's talking to their intended customers and going through the idea and going through the workflows and identifying the different nuances that exist, that's subject matter, that insight that is invaluable, that is necessary to deliver an enjoyable experience, benefits, and value to someone through your service or your product. And
I'll tell you the piece that you're not picking up on in that. When you're talking to people, okay, so let me take a step back. Nobody ever went into a hardware store to buy a 1/4-inch drill bit. What they wanted was a 1/4-inch hole. The drill bit solved the problem. Okay? So you're selling a solution. If you're going out to people that can benefit from the solution, 2 things will happen. 1, they'll steer you because they want you to succeed. But number 2, you've now identified people that are willing to be in your seed investment. They need this. So the founder of McDonald's had this crazy idea, and you can watch the movie with Michael Keaton that tells the story of basically fast food. It didn't exist. You sat in a restaurant, they made it to order, it took forever. Now it was sitting there ready. How did he get a crazy idea funded? He went to meat packers. Because if this concept worked, sales of hamburgers would go up. The meat packers would sell more meat. So they invested. So you'll find many businesses where you find a strategic investor. Now, the key here is not to get too close with one strategic investor that it stops their competitors from wanting to participate. So I've brought in, when cryptocurrency was something that no one understood and everybody assumed was a fraud, I was part of the board of a legitimate crypto bank. And the only way that I could get A, the capital, and B, past that hurdle was bringing Fidelity Investment. That's who manages the most 401ks in this country, and American Express, not as board members, they don't want that visibility, but just as investors. So people are going, well, if they think it's a good idea, that's the end of my questions, right? And so you have to be strategic about it. Here's what you don't understand, or I didn't understand at the beginning. Every VC, every angel investor solely exists to give away money. It's what are you doing that stops them? So if you can remove the things that are going to stop that, they don't want to waste their time. They want to invest. But of every 1,000 people that make it actually in a room to talk with VCs, 2% walk away with money. And I will tell you that when I was training my students, we had a 100% success rate. Now, slightly biased because they're walking in with Jay. And I'm not saying that I'm great. I'm just saying when you get to a certain stage and you've made people billions of dollars, you have a track record, and you could walk in there and say, I'm selling inflatable dominoes because dominoes take up too much space, and somebody will still write you a check. But in the beginning, it's about lining those, who's your potential customer? Oh, well, my potential customer is such and such, and they're already in the seed round. Really?
Yeah, this comes up a lot too in terms of investors. And, the heart of what you're talking about is de risking the deal. You're removing as much risk as possible. So it makes more sense for them to give you that money. And when, you're seeking that capital from investors, you're competing with hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people that want that money from that same investor. And a lot of people founders think that if they present the highest potential, right? Like, oh, our total addressable market is $40 trillion. They're going to give us money because we got the biggest TAM, right? And
So the
yeah,
worst, the worst pitch ever was if everyone in America ate one rabbit a week, the size of the market would be blah, blah, blah. Or there are 8 billion people with 2 feet. If I sell them each a pair of shoes, so it's not about the maximum TAM, okay? Another secret I'll tell you, and Yoshi-san, the head of SoftBank, was fond of saying he doesn't invest in business ideas. He invests in people and founders. Sam Altman, Y Combinator, who's now OpenAI, his whole Y Combinator was based on if you didn't even have an idea, they had a list that they knew that the market needed, they'd give you the idea. So again, they were investing in the founder. So a good part of what you're doing when you're pitching, going out there, is why you. How do you take criticism meeting? How prepared are you? How much research have you done? If you're asked a basic question and you came in unprepared, you've answered all they need to know. If you're argumentative, they don't want to invest and have to sit on that board and deal with you. So it's much more than just the idea. And what ideas are getting funded. Most of investing is me too. Okay. Oh, AI is the big thing. We need to get into AI. Oh, this is the next, whatever it is. Sometimes you'll be too early. Sometimes you'll be too late, but you know what they're thinking about. And so how do you frame what you're selling to take away most of the objections?
yeah, I like this too because it's kind of touching on storytelling, right? The way you frame your pitch, the way you frame your business, yourself. I'm curious, going back to pitches, and these pitches could be for customers, like a landing page is a pitch to your customers in most cases. A pitch to investors, pitch deck, all that stuff. But all of them are persuasive stories. And I'm curious, what's your, again, like methodology or process to identifying the story you're telling for the specific individual audience that you're after? And how do you go about that research and building that story structure? That's kind of like a group of different questions, but yeah.
So it took me 15 years to learn the lesson that I hope will save everybody 15 years. Again, my job is to pay it forward and help ease the journey to success. In the early days of the internet, I had a major thing that I was going to do with Pepsi Cola. And the underlings were impressed enough with the idea and everything. They wanted me to come in, Armonk, New York, meet the global CEO, getting off the elevator, and every secretary assistant's desk had an IBM Selectrix typewriter. Okay. This is in this century. Okay. There's not a computer on the whole executive floor. There's not a computer in the CEO's office. I knew the meeting was doomed. Okay. I'm from Mars and I'm talking to cavemen. And I left there so frustrated, as I had done many times of being early. I could spend the hour telling you things I did first video on a computer. I mean, first music in a video game, all these types of things. And I left there saying, why don't they get it? And it's a long flight back to California. And on that flight, I realized he's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He got there by making a lot of good decisions. It's not his job to get it. It's my job to communicate in a manner that matches his understanding of the world. And once I reversed it, that the onus is on me to communicate so that other person makes it easy. Part B, I used to practice when I was going to do some big sale, and I've named the Fortune 500 company, literally I've worked with them, okay? And I used to go in with all the things that this was good for Coke, all the things this would do for McDonald's, all the things this would do for American Airlines, whoever it was. But the person across the desk that you're meeting with could care less about what it does for their company. Hear me again. They don't care what it does for their company. They want to know, what does it do for them? Will make them look smart to their boss. If they pass it, and I did this with a major car maker, I said, hey, I flew into Detroit, you're my first meeting, I'm going to such and such afterwards. If he passes on it and it comes out later that the other guys did it, and if he passed, he loses his job. I've now put fear into him, okay? So what can you do to make that other person want to lean in that this will benefit them as an individual? Because that's half the battle. They're going to be putting their neck out. Anybody that's doing something with something that's, not established wants some cover, wants some reason. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, there's a lot of personal experiences that are resonating a lot, and a lot of what I'm doing with this 805 startups and Starmata is in a lot of ways supplemental support for the government with their economic development, workforce development, community development. And yeah, most of those conversations with city council members or uh, not elected officials, but the ones that are like staff officials, city manager, for example, the conversations always go back to that, like,
So
what can you
let me cut you
provide
off.
for cover? Yeah.
On the zombie side of it, if you're doing a startup that doesn't have self-sustaining revenues and you're going after public funds, you're going to fail, because this year's money has already been completely allocated and most likely next year's. So the earliest you're going to see a check is 24, 30 months from now. Why would you be making sales calls on that? You can't afford it.
Yeah, there's so many little bits in regards to the dynamics, and that goes back to your original kind of like advice of spending the time talking with these people to understand, their essentially live experiences, but then pick up on what these risk factors are to them and where they're going to be putting their neck out on the line and how that's going to benefit
But
them.
even if they love your idea and say, oh my God, this will make me look so smart, they can't get involved for another year or so. So, I mean, I want to sell something to school districts. Oh, please get in line. Okay. So a lot of people don't seem to understand that. Now, there are shortcuts to this, and the biggest shortcut is find somebody who's already a vendor that can roll your thing into a package that they're already doing. And that's the only way to make that stuff happen.
I love this because, like, again, you have so much experience and different roles and positions to pull from, but currently, you're in this strategic partnership role for a company now, and what you just outlined or touched on is something that another mentor brings up all the time, Mark Honoroff. Like, this is one of the things that I really enjoyed about connecting with you is how many people we share connections with on LinkedIn. It's just shy of 200 people. So I don't know if you know Mark well or not.
Mark and I
But
have been good buddies since the early 90s. So yeah, Mark and I go way back.
well,
Mark and I were working on a new technology for Microsoft that would put video on a computer. And we were the first ones to put video on a CD-ROM. So sounds like two archaeologists talking about ancient history, but good guy.
I love it. Yeah. So, yeah, Mark often is like you talking about the value of finding these strategic partners and ones that are already doing something that you can slot into. And I'm curious, again, like there are so many founders that are trying to do very ambitious things, like yeah, working with schools, working government, other kinds of ventures that oftentimes require immense amount of capital and relationships and influence.
So let me
Yeah,
cut you to the quick. Most founders have new ideas and will assume good workable ideas. Okay. Most big companies are devoid of ideas. They pay their employees enough to show up, but not enough to care. Okay. And so they need those ideas. So I'll give you an example of how I tackle a problem. When Apple launched iTunes and the iPod and jumped into the music space, Sony had ruled that for 20 years with the Walkman, 30 years, okay? And this was decimating Walkman sales. And instantly overnight, Jay has to create a competing service. So I can hire guys to build the service. I can license the music. I can make the greatest box in the world. But how am I going to get the word out? Okay. Steve was spending $100 million advertising iTunes. And when you spend that kind of money, you get the best and brightest of ad agencies. His commercials are still to this day some of the most impactful things. I have a budget of $0. Okay. So I was number 3 at Sony. So I said to myself, who has a problem in the world? Who in the business world has a problem? It's nothing to do with my goal. Who has a problem? And 2 things were in the newspapers. One was United Airlines was in bankruptcy and trying to get out of bankruptcy. The other was there was a movie called Super Size Me by Spurlock, where he just ate McDonald's for a month and basically got diabetes. Okay. And for the first time in McDonald's history, sales were down. So here I have 2 major corporations that are in trouble. No one in my entire life has ever hired Jay Samit because they're having a good year. They take the call because they've tried everything else and it's not going well. So I went to McDonald's and said, I can make you cool again. And make a long story short, buy a Big Mac, get a free track. So every Big Mac box, every tray liner, every sign in every McDonald's would tell you free music, and you go to our website, our competitive website, to iTunes, and you get the music. Remember I said big companies have the best ads? The commercial McDonald's paid and made for that drove 20 million customers to me the first week. And the same week, I went to United. I said, you're losing faith with your customers, and they're sitting there, it turns out, with enough frequent flyer miles unused, and they're in bankruptcy, to take a flight to Pluto and back 8 times. Okay. Huge amount of miles. I said, I can have you hold on to them and make them loyal again and have you announce you're coming out of bankruptcy. We'll do a concert in the sky, never been done before. We'll fill a plane in Chicago with press, have Sheryl Crow perform in air, shoot it with 6 cameras, edit it, and give everybody a DVD so we can make evening news that day. Those 2 promotions combined, they custom painted the plane with my logo and everything. McDonald's ran this worldwide. Both things combined cost me $0.00. Oh, no, sorry. Cheryl had in her rider that when she got to LA backstage, we had to have a pizza waiting. That's my girl. Like, So
Uh,
did those for the price of a pizza. If you've
yeah,
started a company and you can't afford a pizza, then you couldn't have done that.
this is wild, man. Like the creativity and like the yeah, I mean, being innovative and identifying
There's
these
nobody you can't
opportunities.
get
Yeah.
to. So again, in Disrupt You, I try to peel back the, oh, here's an old guy who can call up this one and that one. So I'm 22 and I see an article that Ford is losing their shirt financially because the Japanese cars in the 1980s came with bumper to bumper warranties. They made better cars than Detroit did. And Detroit was losing their sales. So Detroit had to say, here's bumper to bumper. Now, let me define what a bumper to bumper warranty means, because most cars happen to. That means if something breaks in the first, 3, 4, 5 years, Ford would have to pay for it. Well, it turns out the dirty secret that Ford knew was that 1/3 of all repairs done by mechanics was taking a good part out and replacing it with a good part. Meaning they replace the wrong part and they keep on doing it until they fix it because it's a profit center. They don't have to be accurate. Now that Ford was paying for it, this was costing them $200 million a year. I, with not knowing anything about cars, not knowing anything about car repair, not knowing anybody in Detroit, happened to be sitting on a solution. I was making interactive training laser discs. Those are those giant CDs, okay? And it made training custom. Is the red light on? Yes. Is this light on? No. Try this. You could walk somebody through so that repairs would be efficient. I can save them $200 million a year. Now comes to your question. I'm a 22-year-old, half a country away that knows nobody. Solve for the person behind the desk. Why would that person meet with me? And the answer, they won't. There's nothing you can come up with. You have no credibility, you have no anything. Who would they want to meet with? Well, I'm thinking middle America, Americana, apple pie, football, whatever. Start reading the news, and the biggest, most winning football coach of Michigan State had just retired. Not a lot of people calling a retired coach. I called him to make him head of sales of my Detroit office. Everybody wanted to meet him and shake his hand. They talk about this game, that guy, this thing. And then, 30 minutes in, they go, what's the kid here for? Oh, sure. And there's the contract. It's that easy.
Okay, so again, this is brilliant. It's amazing. It's bold, absolutely bold.
If
So
you're not bold, how are you going to make a difference? There's a kid that I interviewed in Disrupt You who did the boldest genius thing ever. He wanted to go into the ad industry. He gets out of college and he gets a job with one of the big 5 giant multinational agencies, only to be sitting in a basement on a computer making reports and stats and wanting to shoot himself. He wanted to be like Madman. He wanted to be creative. He wanted to do great things. So it dawns on him that famous people Google themselves because they have to check if there's something bad being written. And he looked on Google and no one had bought the keywords of the names of the top 5 creative directors of the big 5 agencies. So for the price of a Frappuccino, $9, he bought those keywords. And when they searched themselves, the first thing that came up was, hey, I'd like to work for you. Click here to see my portfolio. 3 of the 5 gave him an interview. And he took a job with one at 10x what he was making because he showed out of the box thinking, creativity, and exactly what the job demands. Is there anybody watching this that doesn't have $9?
I love it. It's like my background is in photography, and I was managing a band because I was photographing them all the time, and I want to be a professional photographer. So a lot of these stories are resonating deeply with me, because initially, and I've shared this a couple times, like I got started photographing real bands, big bands, because my friend had the email address of 311's manager, and pushed me to reach out and ask for a photo pass, and it worked. And I realized, oh, that was so easy. I can just call 411, get the record label's phone number, call the record label, ask for their publicist manager of the bands I wanted, and ask them for a photo pass, and it started working. And a lot of
And what's
that,
the worst that happens?
yeah, the worst that happened was I didn't get a response, or they would say, no, sorry. And like,
But are
yeah,
you any worse off?
no, absolutely not. I was better off because, I kept reaching out to more and more people, and I built a portfolio, and it just,
I learned
yeah.
the same lesson before I was in business. When I was in college, I'm probably dating myself and sounding I'm going to get canceled, but I was what was called girl crazy. I was, oh my God, Uh, and I realized I could ask out the most beautiful women on campus. If they said no, I'm back where I started. If they said yes, I'm on cloud nine and pinching myself. And it was just, an epiphany to me to realize that most people were too intimidated. Most people are too intimidated to reach out to such and such. Now, going up to somebody at a bar and saying, hey, will you go out with me? You're going to get struck down. Just like going on LinkedIn and saying, hey, will you invest in me? Or hey, look at my business. Da, da, da. No. But you can see who's commenting on your field, who's posting articles, who you can comment and interact and start a dialogue over months. Why are they, again, put yourself in that seat. Why are they posting these articles? Because they want to have some awareness. You see an article of somebody retiring, moving down. They didn't die. They didn't get hit by a bus. They still have a network of 10, 20, 30, 40 years worth of contacts and not a whole lot of inbound asking for advice. So you can build that and very little. So back to my 22-year-old Jay, back when I was working with Mark Honorath, okay? I had come up with a video game, and video games were real primitive at that time. And my company had success making video games, my startup. But I had come up with a video game that could have full motion video, and it was a puzzle game. You have to put the pieces together of moving video in a short period of time, and the shortest you win, and you get ahead. And this was the era where it dawned on me that the short videos that everybody would have fun was the MTV era of music videos. So this would be the coolest game if I could get the biggest bands in the world. I don't know anybody in rock and roll. This is years before I ended up running labels. I don't know anything about how that works. I also don't know any way to get to them. But the richest guy in the U.S. in the music industry is a guy named David Geffen. The Eagles, Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Browne, just amazing roster. And the most important guy in the computer industry at that point, and these games played on PCs, was a guy named Bill Gates. So I reached out to an intern at Microsoft to get his email. And I emailed Bill Gates, not asking him to do something for me. I explained how this game would make PCs and Windows more popular. Would he write a letter of introduction? Here's the balls. Introducing me to David Geffen. I want to talk about letter of introduction, an actual letter, because these people weren't on email yet in the music industry. And that's how I came out with a game that had Aerosmith, Van Halen, Nirvana, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, and was the biggest hit of my career.
See,
You had nothing to lose.
yeah, it's incredible, man. And like, I do want to touch on something you brought up too with this, and that's the underlying tact and strategy and respect in how you carry yourself and go about this, reaching out to people that most people are afraid to reach out to, and understanding the timing too. Like you said, at a bar, just walking up to someone at a bar and asking them out is a little bit different. And same thing like on LinkedIn, just reaching out and cold pitching them, hey, give me money. Like, that's not the correct tactic. A lot of what you're leaning into is doing the proper research and coming at it from an authentic angle that's showing that you're not just spamming them, and you're not just like, trying to waste their time and be purely transactional, but you have a deeper understanding of the nuances and context involved in these things and these people. And I think too, and you can share a little bit more on this, but demonstrating that, much like you also were touching on in regards to Y Combinator and other VCs, like the more like relevant trend setting VCs that are investing in people, right? Looking for these qualities of character that are going to resonate with them and be attractive and engaging and exciting to them. Like when you're doing this sort of outreach with people, what are some of like the top qualities that you try to highlight and demonstrate to these people? So like when you're reaching out to the retired football coach, you're still a nobody, and there's still like a real big ask for them to come on board as your head of sales.
So
So
here's the
yeah.
easy way to do it. The only way to be successful, the easiest way, I should say, to be successful is to be the best in the world at what you're doing. Okay? Now, when you go apply for a job, by definition, that job already existed. There's millions of people that have done it. And the likelihood that you're the best in the world at it are probably slim to none. But if you go and do something that no one's ever done before, by definition, you're the best in the world. So try to go to a piece of virgin land. Try to, go out there like an explorer and put your flag in the sand. Now you're going to them as the foremost expert of whatever. And who doesn't want to work with that? And now you just have to keep on backing it up. And so I continually, I became chairman of an AI company 7 years ago. Not a lot of people were talking about until ChatGPT came along, right? I built the first social media network 10 years before Facebook. Nobody knew what social media was. We didn't even know what to call it. So it was real easy for me to go out, because here's what is also the truth. You seem like a good guy, but I guarantee you, because I know in my life, there's always somebody better funded, better looking, smarter, better connected. I don't want to compete to that person. I hate that person. So I want to go where I have no competition. And the second you go somewhere where you have no competition, you're ahead of the pack. How long you get to stay there, then you better be able to back up what you're doing. So to a football coach, that example, who knew nothing about a computer and his best years are behind him, and now he can look relevant and smart to himself, to his spouse, to his kids, to whomever, that's pretty cool. He's not questioning, he's accepting, because I've now made him feel better about himself.
I love it. Real quick, I'm going to touch in with everyone that's tuning in. Got some new people cycling in. Welcome.
Questions, people. Don't be embarrassed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the theme. Be bold.
I'm dumber than all of you. I've just learned from making mistakes the hard way. As I've often told the next investor of the next project, I made my mistakes on somebody else's budget, right? So most in Silicon Valley will not invest in a founder that hasn't failed, because you're going to learn so much the first time.
Yeah, this is true. And yeah, it's I've been playing a lot of like D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, with friends and brother. And yeah, your intelligence might not be the highest role, but your wisdom is definitely maxed out. It's very clear on that, my friend.
So I'll give you another story from my youth. Couple guys that I worked with at the beginning of my career, and I'm old, so you got to go back last century. God, that hurts. I still think I'm 20. They had this brilliant idea. Back then, streetlights were all independent. Okay, this one's green, this one's red, this is green. And they said, what if we hooked up all the streetlights so they're synchronized, traffic would flow better? Okay. And the name of their company was called Datto Traffic. And they went to city planners, like you're trying to do with your thing, in Phoenix, Arizona. And they're like, I don't know what a computer is. This is stupid, da, da, da. So Bill Gates and Paul Allen's first company failed. went out of business. Their second company, Microsoft, did a little bit better. So
Yeah.
don't stop just because you fail. Failing's part of the process. Everyone fails forward. The only person that can take you out of the game is you. The difference between failing and failure is failing is learning what doesn't work, which is healthy. And failure is throwing in the towel and say, I give up. I'm just going to be an automaton. And by the way, your likelihood of having a safe job, when I spoke at Davos and the head of the World Monetary Bank said 20% of all jobs are disappearing the next 2 years globally. So entry-level jobs are the first jobs that have been wiped out in corporate America. So unless you can plot your own destiny and take control of your own future, you're at the mercy of somebody else. That you may be doing the greatest job, but if Blockbuster goes out of business because of Netflix, you lose your job too.
Yeah, I think something that's important to touch on in regards to this is it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with trying to seek that validation for your core concepts of your idea by having conversations with your intent customers so you can vet where you're going wrong or vet your idea and identify where you're kind of going off path from what is actually going to be again enjoyable, beneficial, valuable to those people, and allowing you to make those changes before you build anything. And what that
Well,
does
and you also
is,
want to build the minimal valuable product so you can A/B test as quickly as possible.
yeah, and
That doesn't cost you any money today.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's the heart of all that in lean methodology is yeah to like yeah. Dr. Paxmar over on Twitch is saying rapid prototyping. Yeah, the purpose of doing that is so you're exhausting the least amount of resources and time, but capital being the most
But
important resource.
it's more than that today. AI can build anything you want at basically zero cost. So why isn't it already built? I mean, that's the question nowadays. If somebody goes, "Oh, I got to hire an engineer," I got to, no, you don't. Is it going to be flawed? Sure, but no one's expecting, a polished, finished thing. But the days of here's a PowerPoint, here's a concept, here's a verbal pitch, those days are gone. Because there's a 14-year-old kid, using ChatGPT that can build whatever. And that's who's taking over the jobs. Most of the jobs lost in white collar America over the next 5 years, middle management, entry level positions, accountants, lawyers, you know, graphic artists, photographers, those jobs aren't being lost to AI. They're being lost to someone who has mastered AI. Now, that person will lose their job eventually too, but in the near term, you know, you got to eat.
Yeah, yeah, but like again, like the bigger kind of like I guess theme is risk management, resource management. Whether you're at the highest level of a business venture already, kind of like Facebook level. Granted, right? There's a different degree of consequences when you're taking risk versus being a bootstrapped young founder who is just kind of going out on the first time. There's different context there in regards to how you manage risk and how you assess that and what happens if you go wrong. And like you said, there's failing and then there's failure. And a lot of times, early stage founders, inexperienced founders, because they're rushing, because they're skipping steps, they're investing a lot of their capital, the resources, prematurely into the wrong things. And when they hit a point, a failing point, it turns into failure because they have exhausted all those resources, right? So I'm curious, in your experience with a lot of you've been talking about employing lean methodology and such, what are some I guess the most critical aspects of an entrepreneur moving forward to get something to market that you feel are the most critical things that are often overlooked or skipped?
So you hit on one of my favorites, which is um, my business failed because I couldn't raise the capital. That's as valid as an excuse as the dog ate my homework. The business failed because you couldn't manage capital, because you couldn't raise capital, because you didn't know what you were doing, and your ego prevented you from partnering, hiring, whatever, those that could. So, you know, seen that time and time again. It didn't run out of money. You didn't manage whatever your resources were. Now, I made the fatal mistake when I was starting out. I didn't understand any of this, and I figured things would happen faster and put it all on the credit card. Do not do that. See this gray hair? I'm only 16. I mean, no, it was incredibly stressful. Um, I had a secret motivation that pulled me through it. I had two young kids, and I wanted my sons to have a better life than I did, so I couldn't give up. So there's always a way when you're backed into a corner. There's always another door. Um, can you get out of your own way and not be obstinate on the path that you're on to see what the change is? Many of the biggest companies today pivoted radically because they looked at what they were doing, which is why you want to get a prototype, because you look at the data. So again, dating myself. There were three guys back before you had apps for dating like Tinder and Bumble and all those. There were websites where you could see a still picture, read about the person, and then you're connected. And online dating was huge. And these three guys said, wait a second, now we have video. Let's make a site where you can see the person, hear their voice, their accent, their personality. It was called Tune In Hookup. Brilliant engineers, great interface, easy to use. The first video is a guy standing in front of the elephants at the zoo talking about why you should date them. Well, that probably isn't the sexiest idea. So when they looked at what was happening with their business, it was tanking. Nobody wanted to date these losers. That wasn't in the business plan. If you only track losers, you're dead. But they looked at the data and they saw something that they didn't anticipate. And that was everybody that saw these horrible videos, they're not going to date them, but they're sure going to show their girlfriends or boyfriends or friends, look how bad, the dating pool is. They were sharing the videos. So in their first year in business, they changed Tune In Hook Up and they renamed it YouTube. And by the end of that year, they sold it for $2 billion with zero revenues. So don't be afraid to pivot and look at the data. If you're not generating any data, if you're not have anything to measure, you can only improve that which you can measure.
I think that's actually a really good kind of segue into the importance of documentation. And this too is another thing that a lot of founders, especially from the startup world, really go wrong with. They feel it's too corporate, it's a waste of time. And I'm of the mindset that there's a balance between no documentation and overly documenting every single thing and getting kind of like, especially if you're in the pre-launch stage where you're only daydreaming and coming up with plans but not acting on anything. So I'm curious, like, in your opinion, where's that middle point, that balance, and how do you utilize documentation, like you're saying, to more effectively learn and make sure that you're on the right path or identify new opportunities to pivot to?
So everything until you're getting feedback from actual customers isn't documentation, it's masturbation. You're sitting and playing with yourself. The only one that knows the answer is the customer. We had a great example, and I'll leave out details, but there was a company that wanted to go up against Victoria's Secret. And they wanted a Hollywood celebrity spokeswoman. Who do you hire? And there were a lot of opinions, and it was mostly a room full of men as opposed to men and women. Do you want somebody that's married? Do you want somebody that's single? You want somebody with this size cup? Do you want somebody that's slutty, somebody that's chaste, somebody that's like a mom? What do you do? Okay. And the answer is you don't ask the bunch of people in the room. You run without permission a whole bunch of ads with different pictures, and which gets the most click-throughs you'll know within an hour. And what was funny is the one that was overwhelming wasn't a giant star. It was way down on the list. So when it came time to hire and pay the big bucks, went to the talent agency, said what the business plan is. Who do you got? They recommend this one. How much is that? Oh, can't afford that. How about this one? Oh, can't afford that. Da-da. How about this one? Da-da-da. Got anybody cheaper? And when they got down to the person that we really wanted, they didn't know that was our first choice. They just thought this was a meh. We'll charge anything. You know, I've wasted an hour of my day. I want to get some money to some client. And that's how you do it. So it's all data. So we're running up on the hour. So anybody, if there's anybody listening, otherwise it was a nice conversation, but anybody, last chance to get hopefully valuable advice at a price that you can't beat.
Yeah, we got some people that
Type in
pop
the
through
text box.
into YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn. Yeah, Boyne, you've been hanging out with us over here on Start Model where we're hosting this. If you've got anything you'd like to ask, feel free. Yeah, I know, like, Boyne, you've often been looking for partnerships, strategic partnerships with different people to help with your businesses and get more, like, people with influence utilizing your products and your libraries to share with people. Yeah, Jay, this has been amazing. Like, I know it's mostly just been us having a conversation and evaluating different things in your life, but it's been very insightful. And I'm going to be actually going through and watching this again for my own sake because, yeah, I'm definitely one of the types of people that can get in his own way a little bit too much. And this has been really helpful and insightful. Boyne says, love the conversation. Actually learned a lot already. Wonderful, Boyne. Yeah, Jay, I know we've been talking a lot about early stage kind of like, companies and kind of, best practices and such. When a company is kind of making that transition, let's say, you're a startup, you've raised your series A, you're looking to start scaling, or maybe like, start positioning yourself for an earlier exit. What are some of like, the pitfalls that you see with founders or teams that you have kind of
Okay.
like,
So,
addressed and
so,
helped out?
so we'll wrap up on this tip. There's a psychological leap of faith, like from Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, that you're going to have to make. To get to that Series A, you had to make each nickel look like $1, each dollar look like 100. You had to scrimp and spend as little as possible. Just hang on as long as you can. The second you get cash, it's the opposite. You have to spend that as quickly as possible, not throw it away, strategically, because you need to show scale. You need to show traction. Because if you can quickly show traction, everybody that put in the Series A will write a check for the next series because it's going to be at a higher valuation, and on paper they've already made money and look good. So making that switch of I don't want to spend any money to oh my God, we're spending too much money, we're going to go through all our money in 6 months. That's kind of the purpose, because the VCs would like to come in and gobble some more and some more and some more so that your ownership's down to 3-4% by the time there's an exit. Can't go through all this in just a thing. I hope you actually build an audience and it's worth, guest time to come in the future. Boyne, I believe in you. And, if no one's told you that you can do it, I'm a dyslexic moron. And, it's been a fun and amazing ride that I couldn't have predicted. And I write my books to pay what I've learned forward to shorten the journey for those starting out. Nobody writes a book to make a dime. My books are now in 12 languages, if I can, do the brag bit. And the highlight of my career, and I'll leave with this, isn't the giant deals and the big bucks. It's on any given day, my inbox has an email from somebody who said the book changed their life. I didn't do the work, they did the work. But I've heard from people in 140 countries, and I am touched, but I'm motivated. It has become my passion to try to build job creators, to try to build people that are solving the world's problems and helping, people have a better life than school or their parents thought they could. So thank you for the opportunity to talk today. And I think it's time to say goodbye.
You've been fantastic. I love what you just said. It's definitely in alignment. Like, yeah, what I'm trying to do is just give everyone an opportunity to connect with people that can be inspiring to them, educational, and help them with whatever passion or crazy idea they want to pursue. So thank you for being a very, very positive and impactful contributor to this. And yeah, I'd love to have you back. And you're wonderful. Thanks, Boy, for checking in. Everyone watching over on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully next time you're more bold. You could get more questions answered. But fantastic. All right.
Take care.
Take care, Jay. Take care, Boy.